Hey everybody, it's Bendy Mark here with another video. So in my last video I told you guys that I was going to be giving you all some updates on my daughter who has Sisterlocks. I mentioned that I am now a certified Sisterlocks trainee, and my first client was my baby. She asked me for locks, she asked daddy's permission, everybody was on the same page, so we did this. I will say that this establishment process was very hard, not because there were some things that I was like, it's a learning process, like you learn as you do it, and so there were some things that I'm like, okay, next time, like, I'm gonna do that differently. But like, this should have been maybe a 4, maybe 5 day max project. With the length of her hair, I knew it was gonna take longer, but like 5 days max. This turned into a month-long endeavor. Sitting through getting your hair interlocked from tip to root is a difficult thing and a tedious thing for adults, even more so for 5-year-olds. And so she would get tired of sitting still. You know, she wanted to know, when are my locks going to be done? And so it was a whole thing. Then we had vacation in the middle of the process. Then when we got back from vacation, we had to move. So it was just a lot. I didn't finish until the day before Christmas. And I did the final count, and she has exactly 450 locks. So it worked out. Like, we got to the number we were trying to get to. The pattern looks great, but it took a really long time. I will say some of the challenges that we are going to face with Cruz's hair, and I kind of knew. So a little bit about Cruz's hair. She has silky, smooth, loose textured hair, all of which are characteristics that work against your hair being able to lock with ease. Like, anybody's hair can lock, but there are some hair types that will lock way faster and with much less effort than others. And so the closer you get to 4C, the more ideal your hair is for locking. The further away you get from that, the less ideal. Less ideal doesn't mean that you can't do it, but it just means that it's going to be a more involved process. So I already knew coming in, like, this is we're probably going to be dealing with slippage, like quite a bit of slippage. And surprisingly, I don't deal with any slippage on her hair. What I do deal with, however, is unraveling at the ends. And I wasn't really sure what to do about that, to be honest, so I did a little bit of research, and I've come down to 2 options that we can do. And one of them I had already started doing, so that was kind of good for me to feel like, you know, my intuition was affirmed by what other people have done. But the first option is to just leave the hair alone. Some people's hair type, even if it's not the silky, smooth, shiny, loose hair texture, even if it's not that, some people's hair just likes to come out of starter interlocks. And what I have seen online is that some people will just say, just leave it be. Just leave the hair alone. It's doing what it does, and allow the process to take place. What I have found is that people whose ends unravel and they leave them unattended to and just kind of take a hands-off approach, what happens is the base and the length of the lock very small, skinny, and uniform, and then at the end it kind of explodes and bulges into a really fat end. Now, for some people, that aesthetic is okay, because if you have the hair type that's going to unravel at the ends, it's going to unravel uniformly across your head, and so you're going to have that skinny, fat look all across your head. It's going to be consistent. And so for some people, that's a look. Like, that's a look, and it's fine. For me, I don't really like that aesthetic. That was something that happened with my first set of locks, and I really didn't appreciate it. I mean, it still looked nice. Like, it looked nice, and I think the longer my locks matured, it looked less and less pronounced. But even still, that's not what I want for her hair, especially considering how many locks she has. And I want to keep that consistent and uniformity as much as I possibly can. So the other option that you can do is you can go back and you can braid the ends together, and that will create a matrix, like a braid matrix, and it will stop or at least thwart the lock from exploding and expanding too much. The downside, obviously, is that she has 450 locks, and that's going to be 450 braids that I gotta do. on the end. So that's going to be like a whole nother process that she has to sit through, and she's going to complain and whine, but I'm probably going to do it anyway, just because of the long-term aesthetic, and because I'm in a position now where I can still catch it. Her hair has started the locking process, but she doesn't have a ton of budding yet, so it's still in a place where I can manipulate the situation if I need to. So I'm probably going to go ahead and do that anyway. But aside from that, her hair took beautifully to the interlocks, like all across the length of her locks. The base, like the parting and everything, has stayed together. The parts are less visible as her hair grows out, which is the case for everybody. And the grid is much more apparent once I do retightnings on here. And it's not time to do a retightening yet, so we'll just have to wait to show you guys the grid, a closer look of the grid once it's time for a real retightening. Oh, I forgot to mention, part of what contributed to her unraveling is when I established her locks, I intentionally left an amount of the ends out. And I did that for aesthetic reasons. Ideally, in the long run, I would like her to be able to have mature locks with curly, loose ends. Obviously not too much, but just a little for an aesthetic flair, something to make her locks unique. What I was thinking was to prevent the lock from locking and maturing in that area that I want it to stay loose, that I needed to apply conditioner to that. And that was a mistake. Because while I think that for some hair types, applying conditioner to loose ends that you want to remain loose will work, for Cruz, it was a mistake because her hair is already prone to unraveling. So I took a hair type that was already prone to unraveling, and then on top of that added a very slippery conditioner. And so that caused, in some cases, for the lock to unravel halfway up the lock. So I had to go back and braid that down. With that said, knowing what I now know, I think what would have been the better option for Cruz would have been to stretch her hair, not completely straight, but just to give her a good blowout, and to establish her locks with braids and then leave some of the ends out. And I know for some of you, you're like, braids, oh my God, those will never transform into locks. But hear me out on this. I have a theory that if you stretch your hair prior to installing or establishing braid locks and then wash your hair, the braid that's on the stretched hair will then shrink because it's wet, and there will be little spaces created in the braid pattern, which is important because it's those spaces that allow for the loose hairs to migrate and travel up and down the starter lock to get the process started. I think what makes braids a starter lock type that is so slow to transform into locks is because most people do it on shrunken hair. So they're braiding already shrunken hair very, very tight. And so then of course your hair can't move. And if your hair can't move, it's not going to start the maturing process, or at least it's going to do it, but it's going to do it very gradually. But if you started on blown out hair and then washed it and let it shrink, and then you've got these spaces or gaps in the pattern, you've created room for the hair to be able to migrate. And now, because I know how her hair responds to interlocks, I think that perhaps she would have done better with stretched hair on braids and then give it a wash so that it can shrink, and then allow her hair to mature from there. But aside from that, her locks are looking great. She loves that she has Sisterlocks. She tells everybody. I'm going to continue to do regular updates on her hair as well. I found that, and this is just a tip for anyone who's new to the locking process, and this is why I'm doing it for her too, is that the process for maturing locks is so slow that you barely notice that it's happening unless you take the time to document it. And so I want to be able to document her hair so that she can see how it's changing, and also so that I can see. It'll help me be able to gauge and track if there's any adjustments that I need to make. And if you guys have any questions, leave them in the comment section below. Let me know if you are someone who has this kind of 3C soft, shiny, silky, slippery hair type and have done Sisterlocks. Let me know what your experience has been, what roadblocks you faced along the way, and how you resolved them. But as always, thank you for tuning in, and I will see you guys next time.